people who do not know, because they've probably heard your voice. If they were listening to Karen's show, they've heard your voice there, they've heard your voice here. But for people who do not know, talk to us about what is a drop and your connection to the global majority, just so we can set the stage.
From a manufacturing perspective, doing drops makes it very efficient for us and for the customer. So basically, what we do is we select a certain collection, we market it for a certain period of time, and then once that collection is sold out, they can no longer get it again. So it allows us to be able to drop, no pun intended, whenever we want to.
I love it. And then because the global majority is something that a lot of us are familiar with. I have a number of items from the global majority, this clothing brand that Karen Hunter is the brainchild thereof. And literally this most recent drop, Stay Ready, I think is probably the release of it to me is one of the dopest that y'all have had, because obviously the clothing items are amazing. That's never in question. But you paired the message of Stay Ready with some of the language and the content from one Letitia James, and she's in this conversation at a town hall, basically encouraging people to listen. One, we are prepared. Two, if you ain't prepared, get prepared. And three, now is the time. And that I felt like paired with the Stay Ready theme of this most recent global majority drop, I think was amazing. Talk to us about the theme behind Stay Ready and how that translates not just to this drop, but to the reality that all of us are facing right now, particularly those who are in the business of being in business while also living in a Black body.
Well, if everyone heard that speech she gave, I mean, she just reminded us that we got this. You know,
Mm,
to never lose your confidence, always stay focused, never give up. The fight is every day. And
mm,
when Karen and I we heard that, it's like, that speech she gave is kind of like what we are. That's basically, the inspiration that's stitched into every piece of the global majority is that, you know, to be able to survive in this world right now where, hey, we're not affected by terrorists because we always stay ready. We plan for things. We planned for these things a long time ago. When Trump was in office the first time, we saw the shenanigans he was playing. So therefore, we as a company prepared for this. So today, we're not impacted by tariffs. We're not raising
mm.
prices because we feel like without the people, there is no global majority. So
Wow.
these are things that we're saying, hey, the sacrifice needs to come from Karen and I. It's a privilege for people to spend money with us. It's not
Mm,
it's a personal privilege. It's a choice, and we cherish that, and we thank that. And so our messaging is like, come on, we wanted the challenge that Karen has with her collection is she wants to kind of always push the message. And the marriage between Karen and I is how do we make the message fashionable? How do we take a billboard and make it fashionable? And that's the
mm,
magic. That's the special sauce. So the Stay Ready collection is for you to be flying comfortable, but also to remind yourself to be ready. Be ready is not just to fight politics. It's for your health, your mental well-being.
mm,
You know,
mm.
make sure you eat right, right? Make sure you study. Young kids, make sure you study. Don't if your test is tomorrow, don't study, 5 minutes before the test. Prepare yourself. So
that
making,
that I love.
I'm
The
sorry.
Stay Ready for me, the theme Stay Ready is so applicable to so many different things. And I love that every single one, every single time Karen, and for those of you who are like, who is Karen Hunter? Sometimes we talk on this show as if everybody is constantly tuned into Urban View all day long, because we are. But I know that sometimes people have to turn away and they're not always listening to every single show. But Karen Hunter, who is on these airwaves from 3 to 6 p.m. and then replays from 6 to 9 before Reverend Al's show comes on, every single drop that she's done has a theme, has a message that really is designed to inspire the community when it comes to like how we navigate with the broader society. But Rick, as you said, it's not just about the political reality, it's about our personal lives as well, and having the clothing that we're wearing reflect what the messaging and the themes that sort of underline our lives, right? And so as it says on part of the marketing, the global majority is more than a brand. It's a movement born from commitment to empowerment, unity, and redefining identity. And having that fused into a clothing line, I think is just absolutely awesome. But you said something that, because the last time you were here, you did this. You dropped a little bit of business nuggetry inside the broader conversation, and you ended up blowing our minds. We were learning about all sorts of things, that if you're going to go into manufacturing, here are things you need to consider. You had concepts that half the audience was like, what the hell is that? And people were taking notes, and you just did it again. You talked about the fact that you could see the foolishness from before. So from a business angle, in addition to staying ready, yes, fight the power, yes, stay ready for your personal life, but also staying ready when it comes to the business reality that we find ourselves in. And Rick, this is something that's very important to me, because I'm seeing how the entire economy is shifting, how the winds of change are shifting, and so this idea that you all were preparing for the challenges that a lot of businesses are facing right now from a long time ago. Talk to us about that. What were you able to see in the winds that let you know, okay, tariffs are a thing that might have a real negative impact on our ability to thrive? And yes, me and Karen are going to bear the brunt of the hit, but how we don't want the hit to be ginormous. We want to minimize the power of the hit. And there's an ability to read the tea leaves there. If you could speak just a bit to that, because I feel like that is an undervalued portion of being in business. And I think we're learning in real time as to how important that really is.
Correct. First of all, for example, the statement that we put on the garments is to remain in a constant state of preparedness for any action, opportunity, or challenge. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready. So if you embody that and you go back to when Trump was in office and he was doing the beginnings of the craziness with Canada and Mexico. So most companies in the US have built their whole mechanism, their whole infrastructure on bringing everything in from China. So when we looked at his foolishness in his first term, then COVID, when
Mm,
COVID really shut down the world, that's when we started realizing that we must have multiple plans of action, because that really taught us that not just for manufacturing, everything can be shut down if you don't have an alternative means to produce your goods.
wow.
So if your whole business is based upon one country, what happens if something goes wrong with that country? Or what
Mm,
happens if they decide that since they are the only ones that produce your garment, your materials, they want to raise the price on you? What's your option B, C, and D? So when COVID came, it was our mission to develop options A, B, C, D, E, and F.
mm,
And so from there, we hop on planes, we go to different countries. We hop on planes, we go to different countries, and begin to start setting up different mechanisms of producing goods. Then the phase two of that is bringing things here and then stocking them here. So
mm.
therefore, if any type of catastrophe has it, we're sitting on 2.5 million units. So that was more of the strategy, is being able to
Wow.
predict. You do have to have funding. You do have to have funding, but the whole thing is you have to definitely, you know, think about the future and plan for the future. And therefore today, we're sitting back here smiling because we're not affected.
Mm. And that's a big smile. I was just reading in today's Wall Street Journal that this so-called tariff, agreement, this mini agreement between the United States and China is now the Americans are pulling their hair out because the Chinese are sort of slow walking their approval process for these rare earth minerals, which was one of the main things forcing the Americans to the table. And China not only produces what it like upwards of 60% of these materials, but they manufacture upwards of 90% of these materials. So it's not even just America that's dependent on the Chinese when it comes to these materials that you absolutely have to produce anything battery, electric vehicle oriented or otherwise. So yeah, total dependency on a single producer of your product is definitely a mess, or should I say, not being totally reliant on a single producer of the products that you need for your business is certainly a message that I think a lot more
Yeah, that's
businesses, particularly small businesses, are waking up to.
that's a recipe for disaster. You have
Mm,
to have multiple options. Like you have to be able to go out on multiple dates. Let's say that the first date didn't work out. Well, you're still busy. You got a date on Wednesday and date on Friday. You have to be
mm,
able to have your options, and then your options also help you with being competitive with pricing. So if you have, 3 or 4 manufacturers you work with or suppliers you work with, now you are in control of your pricing. You are in control of how you're able to build your business. If it's just a one-on-one, that's a very, very, very delicate space, because at any particular time, if they decide to raise their prices or not continue to work on that particular product or material, you could potentially be out of business. So you have
mm,
to definitely think about having multiple options in anything in life. If you're going to your job, I always tell people, if you're working your job and you're happy with the job, fantastic, but always be looking for something else. The best time to
Yeah.
look for a job is when you have one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the best time to look for
I
it.
I remember a few years ago, some headhunters reached out, and they had some positions that I was like, oh, that would be kind of dope. But I was like, but I'm perfectly happy. I'm really happy here. I have no. And a friend of mine was like, girl, if you don't go on that interview and just see what the world is offering right now. You haven't had to interview in a long time. Just see what it's like. And boy, did I see. That was a very important thing.